What if I told you the most powerful citizens in the free world are those who don't vote?
It's kind of sad that I don't do that, but I'm really busy. Don't know what to believe or who to believe.
I don't know why. I think it's just a lot more difficult for people to actually care about it.
I'm Mr. Beat, and I'm a registered voter. In fact, I'm about to get my vote on right now. See? There's my clone getting ready to go vote. Hey, it's not illegal to have your clone vote for you, okay? That was a joke. Anyway, and this may be no surprise to you since I teach government for a living, but I love voting, and I think that voting for public officials is one of the most important things that you can ever do. I voted in pretty much every election since 2000. That's when I first became eligible to vote. So according to my estimation, about 21, maybe 22 elections. I've honestly lost track at this point. But here's the thing, many people don't vote. I mean, many people who can vote don't vote. That's right. People vote not to vote. In this video, we shall look at the 6 main reasons why people choose not to vote. For this reason, let's focus on my home country, the United States of America. I'm sure you've heard of it. It thinks it's kind of a big deal.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
While the United States has federal elections every 2 years, voter turnout there tends to be lower than most other democratic countries. Now, part of this is because voting is not mandatory here. Still, turnout is highest during general elections that coincide with presidential elections. The presidential election of 2020 actually had the highest voter turnout since 1900. It was impressive, but what people still didn't bring up much was the fact that a third of all folks eligible did not vote.
This election is the most important in the modern history of this country.
Well, 1 in 3 Americans apparently disagreed with you there, Bernie, as they chose to stay home instead.
That's 80 million people.
And for most presidential elections over the past 100 years, the turnout rate has often only hovered between 50 and 60%.
And it's even worse for midterm elections.
Midterm elections, or general elections held near the midpoint of a president's 4-year term, have typically had a turnout rate of between just 35 and 45% in recent years. Although in 2018, 49.4% showed up to vote, the highest midterm election turnout since 1914. For local elections, which are held every year, only around 15 to 27% of those eligible vote. Ugh. However, there is quite a bit of evidence that plurality voting, which the United States mostly has in all of its elections, is causing Americans to not be motivated to vote. Plurality voting just means you only get to pick one candidate, and the candidate with the most votes wins the election.
It's winner takes all, and I go into its problems in this video. Check it out later, maybe.
In countries where voters choose public officials according to proportional representation, turnout is generally much higher.
Plurality voting reinforces the duopoly of the 2 major political parties here in the United States, and it often makes it so that people feel pressured to pick the lesser of the 2 evils. You see, most Americans identify as independent, meaning they are not affiliated with either of the 2 major political parties. This means they often are not that excited about the 2 choices they seem to only have come election day, so they'd rather just stay home and protest the entire system, yo. Well, to be fair, they could vote for third-party candidates, but sadly, most Americans don't think that third-party candidates typically have much of a chance at winning at all, which is why third-party candidates don't have a chance at winning at all.
Now, you could vote in primary elections or caucus to get the two major political parties to nominate a candidate you actually really like, but often this process is a pain in the butt, especially if there are closed primaries. And again, the party only gets to nominate one, so our old friend plurality voting determines who will be the one and only nominee. This is related to the first reason, but often this reason is due to, specifically, the Electoral College. Unless Americans live in a swing state, meaning a state that tends to go back and forth between the two major political parties when voting, often they feel like their vote won't make a difference. For example, in 2020, almost 70% of all votes in Wyoming went to the Republican candidate, Donald Trump. The Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, got just 26.6% of the votes there.
Think about it. If you're a Democrat in Wyoming, why would you be motivated to vote when your political party rarely even has a chance of winning there? In the United States, there are many barriers that prevent people from voting.
First of all, some people just can't get off work or school to vote on election day. After all, there's a limited number of hours on that day in which you can vote. Sure, most states offer at least some sort of early voting, but some do not. Even if you can find time off to vote, maybe you don't have an ID to vote, as many states require, or perhaps English isn't your first language, and you have a hard time reading election information to know where to go or what's even on the ballot. In most states, you have to go out of your way to register to vote. Or even if you are registered, sometimes officials do these things called voter roll purges, where they just decide to deregister a bunch of voters at once, often not telling them that they've made them ineligible to vote. In the 2020 elections, many voters encountered really long lines at polling places, or spots where voting takes place for a given precinct during elections. This is because there has been a decline in the number of polling places in recent years, despite an increasing population. A big reason why polling places have shut down is less funding for election offices. Perhaps someone doesn't vote because they have a disability that makes getting to the polling place more difficult. Perhaps they don't vote because they forgot about the deadline for sending in an absentee ballot, or a ballot you mail in since you can't make it to your polling station.
All of these voting barriers can be intimidating, and so many folks figure, meh, I don't want to deal with it. I'm just going to stay home. For those first three reasons, I was talking about why Americans, specifically, typically don't vote. But for these last three reasons, I'm talking about why people don't vote around the world.
They think the systems that our government is based on are so corrupted that any vote is just a superficial gesture at this point. They are disillusioned with politics, and they feel like their vote wouldn't have actually made a difference with the big sweeping changes needed to make society better. They may have a point. Mathematically speaking, perhaps voting doesn't make a difference. There's even a phenomenon to describe this. It's called the paradox of voting, and it says the costs of voting almost always exceed the expected benefits. It's highly unlikely that your individual vote will be the pivotal one that changes the results of any one election. Therefore, many feel it's just not worth it to deal with obstacles to voting. They're just not that interested in politics, man. They don't see how what these public officials do is actually relevant to their own lives. Who cares that Tim Bob got elected? That's not going to affect my day-to-day life, is it? Well, I guess that's my job, eh? To make all this stuff relevant to you. Okay, so let me try this. Look, these public officials do affect your day-to-day life. There is not one day in your life that goes by that is not affected by what your government does. The water you used to take a shower this morning, that sales tax you paid when you bought your coffee, those roads you drove on today, the classroom you're sitting in right now. Literally, the air you are breathing in right now is clean or not clean because of government action or inaction. You can't escape the influence of government. It's all around us. Second, screw the paradox of voting, okay? Voting can make a difference.
What's today?
Election day, dummy.
Well, I'm not even registered.
I registered for you in the mail.
Well, that's great. I could get jury duty now.
This isn't just the premise for a mediocre movie, okay? We've literally had elections that were determined by a single vote, like in real life. In 2016, Republican David Ainsworth beat Democrat Sarah Buxton for a seat in Vermont's state legislature by 1 vote. He got 1,004 votes, she got 1,003 votes. What's even crazier is that 6 years prior, Buxton defeated Ainsworth for the same seat by just 1 vote. Oh, you want more votes? In 2002, Republican Ann Ruette beat Democrat John Kovaleski for a seat in Connecticut's state legislature by 1 vote. She got 3,236 votes. He got 3,235.
There are several other examples of close elections like this, I'm telling you. Ultimately, though, when you think about it, voting just means having your voice heard. And I've never met another human being that doesn't want to have their voice heard.
You go out of your way to let everyone know your favorite food, music, shows, and sports teams. So why on earth would you not want everyone to know who should have power over you?
Because ultimately, that is what we are doing when we vote. We are granting permission for certain people to have more power over us and more control over our community.
People who don't vote tend to be less educated, tend to have less money, and are younger than most of society. And as it turns out, these are often the groups less represented in government, the ones whose voices are heard the least amount. And this feeds into their disillusionment, creating a vicious cycle of, well, government's not doing anything to help us anyway, so why bother voting?
The bottom line is the people that should be voting, arguably more than anyone, are the ones not voting. Let's change that. I vote that you vote. Oh hey, my clone is already done voting, see? It's quick and painless. So do it. So after we decide we're going to vote, how do you know who to vote for? Well, believe it or not, a lot of times political logos can influence who we decide to vote for. Hey, guess what? This video is a collaboration with Cheddar, not the cheese, but the YouTube channel, who has just released a video at the same time as this one about the hidden meaning of political logos and why political logos even became a thing in the first place. And they're releasing their video at the same time as this one. Check it out. It's somewhere up there. So what do you think? What are other reasons why people decide not to vote? Let me know down below for sure. And now it's time for my monthly shout out to all my Patreon supporters who donate at least $15 or more each month to my channel, starting with the biggest donors alphabetically. Thank you to Adam Lucky, Alicia Solberg, Andrew B., Anthony Beckett, Asif Ishmael, Austin Ciros, Bill Dowd, Corey Ryman, Douglas Martin, Dr. Paul J. Lilly, Empty Machine, Isaiah Warfield, Matt Standish, Neo R14, Nick Everett, Osbers Gaming, Pat Ia Pickett, Fonseca, Sean Connett, Adam Christians, Alex Gorel, Andrew Snyder, Grant Hughes, Ian Driscoll, Elon Capone, Jack L., Jacob Birnbaum, Joel Serrano Lozada, KZ210QB, Oliver E., LT Marshall, Naderade, Samuel Striz, Society's Basement, Stacy, Steve Bryan, Thomas Oppenheim, Warren Girard, Waterfort, and Zachary F. Parker. Thanks to all of you for donating, and thank you for watching.